Hi, welcome to Before You Fly, Check the Maps webinar this month on how to use pre-flight checklists and workflows on the Aloft Network. I'm Erica Cooley, Aloft's Content Marketing Manager, and I will be your co-host today with Aloft's Customer Success, Kevin Teen. I am an FAA certified Part 107 remote pilot since 2017, and here at Aloft, I am responsible for keeping the drone community current on how to leverage UAS technologies to fly with compliance and safety in the national airspace. Now I'll hand it over to my co-host, Kevin, to tell you a little bit about himself and to start introducing some of the topics we'll talk about today.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Erica. Kevin Teen with Aloft here. I'm more on the customer success side, so I help our customers learn the platform and help them integrate its use into their specific operations. I'm a Part 107 pilot as well. I graduated Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and I've been working with drones really going back to my youth, flying RC helicopters when I was young. So all operations can vary widely, and depending on pilot experience and use case, and even the types of aircraft that we're flying, how we track those different operations can vary greatly. However, there's one big consistency across all those moving parts, and that's checklists. So, really, we know checklists are important to aviation to help prevent accidents. And we know this, that, every time we get on a commercial airline, commercial flight today, turn to the left as you're boarding, you'll see the pilots with that big ring of laminated checklists. And we can all rest assured knowing those checklists were completed since we successfully made it to our destination and back home, of course. So the same concept is important in preventing accidents, creating drones as well. These drones are aircraft entering our national airspace and should be treated as so. So even though there's no, lives or crew, directly on board, using checklists can still prevent accidents due to aircraft setup, the type of operation, surroundings, or even the weather. So thank you. I'll hand it back over to you, Erica, so you can take it from there.
Yeah, awesome. And those are great points, and I think really feed into what we wanted to talk about today, about checklists and risk assessments and how they currently are being used by drone pilots and enterprise UAS programs, and some of the new features that we've added on the Aloft network just to increase safety and more situational awareness for drone pilots ranging from recreational all the way to enterprise. So now I will dive into giving a demo of Before You Fly. So a new feature we've launched a little over a week ago, and in the first about 10 or so days that we have been had this feature live, and it's on iOS and Android. This feature is live. We've received over 3,000 submissions or engagements with the checklist feature, which is really great because it's showing people are interested in this. This option is engaging and maybe helping them understand some of the educational steps that they can take pre-flight to make their operations more safe. So I'm gonna get a screen open, and currently this, as I mentioned, this is live on Before You Fly on Android and iOS. It isn't on desktop currently, but in the future that may be an option that is added. So if you don't see what I see on my Before You Fly app, go into the App Store or the Google Play Store and just make sure that your app is up to date, and this new interface should be available for you. So the first step to checking out the new checklist feature is you'll want to come into the Before You Fly app. And you'll scroll up so that you can see the airspace advisory bar. And here you'll notice some updates to the interface, along with Notify and Fly, which I'll reference at the end, is the checklist option. So when you click on the checklist button, you'll see the very first time that you open the B4UFLY app after this update, you'll get this first checklist, which is the getting started. So these are 3 of the absolute foundational steps that you need to take as a drone pilot, whether you're recreational or Part 107, which needs a few more steps to it, but would be to register your drone with the FAA. So under each of these is a link. You'll see Visit FAA Drone Zone. And so if you click on that link, that will take you to the drone zone where you can go through all of the steps to registering your drone. We have some educational videos that I'll put here in the chat to a link of a tutorial video if you'd like some more information on registering your drone. But let's say you've already registered your drone. You'll check that box. Drone labeling, so that's kind of the second step after you've registered. You need to make sure that that unique identifier that you received from the FAA is clearly labeled on your drone, somewhere that it could be seen. So there's some more information there of how to label your drone. You can click that link and you can check that. And then the final is the trust and safety test. So this is the recreational UAS safety test that the FAA released, which gives basic information of how to operate safely in the national airspace system as a recreational pilot. So if you are a recreational pilot and you haven't taken the trust test yet, you can click the Get a Trust certification, and that's completely free, and that will allow you to comply with that final step of the Getting Started checklist. So we have all 3 of those checked here. We'll click Next. And then is our second checklist, and the second and the third checklist are more flight specific to an operation that you would be about to take. So when you take that first checklist, that will not appear again. That's just the first time you see that. And then after that, the checklist I'm about to show you for risk assessment and the pre-flight checklist will occur when you would like to do a checklist for an individual operation each time you're in the B4UFLY app. So the first option here is pilot health. So it's just asking about your personal well-being, how you're feeling before your operation. Good, so you check that. Pilot state of mind, this kind of indicates some of the questions that you'll see on the trust test or the Part 107, making sure that you're not hurrying, you're not under any pressure. So we'll check that. And then the final one is just overall condition of the pilot. So if you've taken any medication, things like that. These are more of just your risk assessment of you as an individual operator to kind of check in with yourself to see if you are feeling ready to operate your UAS. We have all 3 of those checked, and we'll go next. That completes our risk assessment checklist, and then is on to our final pre-flight checklist. So this is more specific to the aircraft itself that you're flying or the airspace around you. So the first option is aircraft inspection. So this is looking at the framework of your drone, the batteries, propellers, checking all these components of the drone that you most likely already do, just giving a reminder. Each operation we have, sometimes we get so in the flow that we forget these small safety measures, and that's the purpose of the checklist, is just to create cyclical actions that we take every time we are ready to operate our drone. So we'll check that. And then checking your area of operations. So this is something that is just basically reminding you you're already in the B4UFLY app. So the next couple ones are all just about airspace safety. So have you checked the airspace to make sure that everything is safe in your takeoff and landing area? Maybe you have your helipad out that you want for your takeoff and landing spot. We'll check that one. And then airspace compliance. This leads more into, are you in controlled airspace? Do you need LANC? If LANC is not available, have you submitted a airspace authorization request through the drone zone to allow operations, maybe potentially above that ceiling if you need to operate there? Do you have all of your documents together in case someone was to ask, if you are permitted to fly at the height or in this specific area? And then there's also a link there for getting a LANC authorization. This gives a little bit more information and you can reference some of our tutorial videos that we have. I'll put that link in the chat as well. That gives, a step-by-step of how you apply for lands coming from the B4UFLY app and going directly into the Aloft platform, or any of the other USS service suppliers to apply for access to fly in controlled airspace at around 371 airports around the US. We'll check that. And then the final one on airspace is just airspace safety. So seeing if there's any TFRs, maybe you checked your airspace, let's say a few days ago when you're doing some pre-flight planning, and now there's an active TFR, you would want to check the airspace advisories before you take off, just to see if there's any changes to those airspace advisories since the last time you looked. And we can kind of take a look at that here once we get through the checklist. So check that. And the final one on the pre-flight checklist is just assessing the flight area one final time, see if there's any obstacles. Maybe you have some trees or power lines or things like that that you will need to fly over to get to your operational height for the project that you're flying. So just kind of being mindful of that for takeoff and landing in your area. So check that. And now we have completed our checklist and risk assessments. So you'll get this, you will get this pre-flight workflow completed. And after I finish the B4UFLY presentation, Kevin will be speaking more about workflows and how those really work well for our enterprise users, just for creating consistent procedures and steps that are taken by every pilot at every operation. But this is a really great entry level. If you aren't currently using any safety checklists for your drone operations, these are two pretty quick and easy ways for you to add this into your pre-flight checklists and workflows that you already are maybe using, or just starting off as the basics. And then the final option on this would be to submit a notify and fly. And it's pretty quick, so I will just give a quick rundown of that. And what notify and fly is just a brief overview, is an option for in uncontrolled or controlled airspace. So it's good to mention that was something that changed in the update. You can now submit a notify and fly in controlled airspace, but to mention, it is not a replacement for LANS. So this would be a voluntary second step that you would take after you received your LANS authorization for you to actually show up on the B4UFLY map. It is anonymous, so none of your personal information is given out. And what it does is it allows you to see if there's any other drone operators in the area. This is a feature that is really in its first iteration, and we're going to continue to update to add more granular information, being really specific. But I will show you the steps of it. It's pretty quick and easy, and a great step to take after you do the pre-flight workflow, just to give one final piece of situational awareness for other drone pilots in the area. So from here, you'll click next. It will automatically select the area that you are at. So you can, select anywhere on the map. Moving your pin around, we'll just do it at my current location. Again, here is a message letting you know that this is not a replacement for LANS or drone zone authorization. It's just really important we kind of create that differentiation because this is fully voluntary, whereas LANS is not. That is, a requirement from the FAA to operate in controlled airspace. So I'm actually in uncontrolled airspace right now. And there are 4 options: recreational, commercial, government, and first responder. So the first 2 are pretty self-explanatory, but the second 2, give options for government agencies that might be using drones for work, or also first responders who may be using drones for life-saving work, just to allow other pilots in the area, like let's say you're just out for a recreational flight and there might be first responder drone activity that you would want to yield right of way to, so that they can proceed with their operations. So for the purposes of today, we will select commercial. One question I've received when I've given this demo is the one that is highlighted in blue is the one that you've selected. So just that, we'll click next. Currently, the parameters of the start time are set for when you are submitting the notify and fly. in the future, hopefully being able to plan these out, kind of like we have with the Lance feature now, it's a great iteration to look forward to. Same with duration and ceiling height. Those are two that are just set, since we're in uncontrolled airspace in this example, is set for 400 feet. So if you were in controlled airspace, it would set for whatever the ceiling height is there, and then 60 minutes is that set duration. So if you needed to go longer than that, you would just submit a second one at the time that 60 minutes expired, and then you'll click File Flight. We'll get a verification, get to select some fun taxis, make sure I'm not a robot, and we'll click Verify. And there we go. Now our flight area has been reflected on the map. You'll see your flight notification posted successfully. We see a blue circle surrounding the pin that's dropped at my location. And if we scroll up to our airspace, let me click into it. There we go. If we scroll up to our airspace advisory bar, now we see it says caution. It was green before, good to go. And here is our drone flight. We'll see that it's commercial. There is a random ID identifier that is given to that. And we have our start time as well as our duration and ceiling height. So I think with that was pretty much what I wanted to show on the B4UFLY app in terms of checklists and risk assessments that we have built in with our new feature. If there's any questions on this, feel free to add them into the chat as we go. And now I will hand it over to Kevin, and he will be giving a deep dive into our enterprise platform, which is Aloft Air Control, and really showing how these workflows and checklists are being used actively by our customers now, but also all the awesome features that can kind of be birthed through this process. All right. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Erica. A lot of good fundamentals there that should be checked before you launch, before every flight, helping not only keep us safe, people around us safe, and kind of increase that situational awareness for other pilots as well. So switching gears here, yeah, our customers and users have recorded a little over 250,000 checklist logs to date on the platform. So checklists have become very important to their operations, again, to help them stay safe, compliant, and even aligned with their standard operating procedures if we're working with companies. So right now we're going to do a quick preview into how easy it is to use these checklists and how they can be logged and associated with our flight activity in our air control platform, as well as how customizable and flexible they are depending on your type of operations. Get my screen sharing. So hopefully that's coming through okay for you. So what you're looking at here on my screen, you're seeing my phone casting live. So we'll poke around on that in a second. And then on the right-hand side is our web dashboard for air control, where I have currently pulled up a workflow that has been set for our account. So as Erica alluded to, we can have full control over these workflows, again, depending on the type of aircraft, depending on our use case, or again, pilot experience tends to be a big factor as well. So just a quick preview, you can see I have, we're going to select our mission first, and then we'll move on to a risk assessment, our pre-flight checklist, and we probably won't get to it for today's example, but you can see we also have the post-flight section as well. So very easy to work with. We have it all set up. So now if we switch over to the app, I'm logged in as a pilot standing in the field. Let's follow that same workflow that's been set up. So we can head into our mission tab here, which is going to show me everything that's been approved and assigned to me as a pilot. But for today, I'm going to create a new checklist, and you'll see it's going to automatically fill a lot of this information for me as the pilot. I'm just going to put a quick title in here for us, all we need, and we can create that mission. And you'll see the app is now just going to walk us through that expected workflow, kind of the digital standard operating procedures, if you will. So there's going to be some overlap with what Erica showed, but you can see this is maybe a little bit more in depth. And again, just to reiterate, this is all customizable. You can change topics, the questions, the answers. So in this case, we're actually presented with a risk assessment first, which is a little bit more multiple choice than a binary checklist. And we cover a lot of Part 107 basics in this example. So the idea of currency and recency, when's the last time we flew? We get into similar with the I'm safe checklist, how are we feeling? Any hazardous attitudes to identify, feeling too confident or macho, as the FAA would put it. How much prep are we putting into this flight? Any planning, or are we just kind of showing up on the fly? Any visual observers or sensor operators with us? And then we get into more the situational questions. So what does the area look like around us? Any obstacles? Will we be by any highways, power plants, things like that? Do we have our pad set up? Do we know where we're going to fly? Have we defined that? Or is the area new to us? And in this example, I am also in uncontrolled airspace, daylight hours, and it is a beautiful day outside. So we'll push forward. It's going to give us that risk score. So again, this is customizable, so you can make it more meaningful to your pilots and operations. Meant to be that temperature, the temperature gauge, the thermometer of how risky is this flight potentially. So if you think of a standard risk matrix, if you're familiar, 30% and below is typically low. So we'll get the thumbs up for this flight. And then as we proceed, now we're getting into our pre-flight checklist. So fairly generic here. This could apply to several aircraft. And we could fly through this pretty well, checking, make sure the gimbal lock's off there, batteries are all charged, our propellers are secured nice and tight, everything's up to date. Similarly, let's check that airspace, check ourselves as the pilot, anything else we need to adjust on the aircraft. Last but not least, if we understand the airspace that we're operating in, are we compliant? Do we have that authorization? And you can see we even have some optional items on here as well. So what I did want to do next, just to kind of close out that example, is if I hop over onto the web, just to show you what it looks like once the pilot flies and comes back and all the data is now in air control, you can see here we have a number of missions. We just created one together. And in our procedures tab, you'll see we keep that, for our historical records, that timeline of event. So, should we ever have questions, coming from management, insurance, legal, or even the FAA, we can always have this in our back pocket to show our pilots are following those procedures, we're sticking to our checklists and our safety checks, and you kind of have this preserved. Hopefully it never is needed, but you have that to kind of back you up as well. So I think that's a pretty good run through, and I'll hand it back to you, Erica, and maybe we'll kick off the Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks for that demo, Kevin, of Aloft Air Control, showing kind of the more robust workflow that enterprise users can have with checklists and risk assessment. So with that, we will open up our Q&A. So the first question that I'll take is from Larry Lindeen, and the question is there any way to know when an airport will be integrated into lands? So this is a great question. I actually will share my screen if you guys would like to see, but a good way to know if an airport may be coming onto land soon for airspace authorizations to be done through a USS provider like Aloft is you'll see a grid. So we're getting information from that airport of a grid that one day hopefully will be colored with the specific airspace and the different ceiling heights. So I'm going to share real quick. So I pulled up an example in the area of Montgomery, Alabama, and we're actually here looking at airspace that is surrounding KMXF. And as you can see, this is a UAS facility map that says Lance inactive. So Lance is currently unavailable, and you would need to apply for a airspace authorization through the drone zone instead. But kind of a good way to know that possibly in the future that airport might be coming on as an area that would be available for auto approval. So it's a great question. I really appreciate that. Stop sharing. And another question that we received from Daniel Johnson was, does Aloft pull real-time data for TFRs, or does it download that information once a day to the app? So it's a great question. All of the TFRs that you see in the Aloft platform and on B4UFLY, those are all live data that we're receiving from the FAA's network. So that information is updated as frequently as the FAA receives it. So things like maybe presidential TFRs or wildfire TFRs, sometimes those can come on even quicker. So that's just kind of a light touch on TFRs. And in order to fly, we need to have the waiver and LANC to be approved, correct? So if you're in a grid that is LANC enabled, you should be able to just apply for a LANC authorization. And if you have a special use case, you want to fly above that ceiling height, that is when you would need to use the drone zone. So there's kind of a little differentiation there. And then if you were referencing the notify and fly feature, just to reiterate, that's completely voluntary, so that is not required. It's just something that you can add for additional situational awareness on the B4UFLY platform, so other pilots can see if you're operating there. So if you were in controlled airspace, you would need a LANC authorization, and then you could also submit a notify and fly if you would like to add that additional layer to the map. Yeah, and Tony Smith asked a great question, which Kevin answered in the chat, was can the checklist be customized on mobile or only on desktop? And so the response is that on B4UFLY, it's just a great starting point for general practices. Workflows customization is currently only available on our enterprise platform, which is Aloft Air Control. And that, if you're interested in learning more about that platform and seeing if that would be an offering that would be great for you or your team members, you can always reach out to us at sales@aloft.ai. Kevin, did you want to come on to see if there's any questions that you wanted to address?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a few questions, and I might lump some of them together. So there were a lot of questions around workflow customization, and then a little bit about how do we support offline or more rural areas where we might have limited connectivity. So let's see here. I'm going to try to share my screen again here. Got a second to come through. All right, so if you're looking at my screen, a similar snapshot as to what I was showing before, showing the app alongside our web dashboard here on the air control platform. And I have that same workflow pulled up where we get into picking our risk assessments and checklists for the workflow. You'll see we can click on these links. I can also hop over into our checklist section. Again, this is going to be more of the customization. How can I edit it so it's more appropriate for my aircraft or use case? So here you'll see I have a number of checklists in there. I can pick these to be part of that workflow. I can also leave it open and say, hey, I'm going to require this pre-flight checklist, but then I'll let the pilot choose the pre-flight checklist that matches the drone they're flying that day. So we work with a range of customers. We see autonomous users that are kind of planning their own activity, getting their own authorizations, really responsible for their own activity and actions. Then on the other end, we see heavily involved admins or chief pilots assigning work out, pre-approving or approving requested missions from pilots, maybe filing that LANC on behalf of their pilots. So it's really built to be fully customizable and support a number of operations. So on top of that, again, the customization, if you need that robustness, that's going to be available on our air control platform. And as well as, I'll switch gears now, kind of addressing the more offline checklist, offline workflows. We do have a couple features to help support that. That is certainly something our customers run into very frequently. One thing I'll point out is this bookmark on our map here in the app. So that is letting me know that I have saved my airspace offline use. So if I tap that, you'll see it actually removes the area. I can pick a new pin. I can move my pin over, tap that bookmark one more time, and it's actually going to download a pretty big area around us. Just as an estimate, it's about an hour and a half drive in each direction, about the coverage size there. So we support offline maps, advisories, airspace. Now, obviously, if you go offline and something like a wildfire TFR pops up while you're offline, we're not going to have that connectivity to understand that, to get that visibility. So just something to be aware of when you operate in those areas. Always a good idea to do a last check. Maybe you left the office that morning and saved everything, but that kind of last gasp of internet before you go offline, try to get that one more check on your mobile device. And then not only for our airspace, our workflow procedures are saved with our account when we log in. So here on my mobile device, if I were to go, I can't do airplane mode here, but if I were to go offline, pick a mission, it would still present me with the same workflow steps. Because those are saved when we log in for that purpose. And then lastly, I just wanted to point out the same concept with our missions. We can also give custom workflows as we prescribe or set up missions out for our users. So in this case, we can even download the mission, which is going to include a lot of our details, our mission area, the airspace including. And then on top of that, if it has a more custom or different workflow that's been assigned, that will also get downloaded with the mission should we go offline. So it's really simple to use. You'll see I have a few downloaded already, and I just have to tap this cloud download icon, and just like that, we have another mission saved if we were to go offline. So all those moving pieces kind of fit together, and if you do run into this frequently and you are a more commercial operation interested in learning more, glad to provide those details. Again, please feel free to reach out in any of the avenues. We'll be glad to help.
I had a question come through from Gordon Johnson. Is there a grid view that shows flight ceilings in the area to help plan operations more effectively? So yeah, that's a great question. I think you're referencing showing kind of those little grid blocks that say 100 feet, 200 feet, giving you more information about exactly how high you can get auto authorization. So yes, those are available. If you kind of zoom in on those circles that surround controlled airspace, you can get that information. You can also drop your PIN, type in the exact address of the area that you'd like to operate in, and that will give that information to you of exactly how high you could get auto authorization, if that's in a LANS-enabled area, or if you would need to then proceed through the drone zone. Let's say that operational height wasn't going to be conducive for your operation. You could then proceed through those steps. And I did share a link to a few resources on our YouTube channel and our website that kind of walks you through that process. I'll share one that is about the drone zone because there are, kind of some steps that you take to apply if you need that. Yeah. Oh, let's see if there's any other questions that came through. There was one about whether this session is being recorded, and you guys will receive access to this following the live webinar. We'll email you the recordings so that you can use this for reference. If there's any final questions, or Kevin, if you had any other topics you wanted to address before we wrap up the session.
I think we did pretty good coverage. We can leave it there. I guess real quickly, maybe for clarification on that last question, I didn't realize I stopped sharing already, but just to pull it up real quick, we absolutely do have those airspace grids, the facility maps available, so you can see, what's the maximum height that I'll get instant authorization back. But again, we can go even in a 0 foot area, such as here in the center there. You could still request above that, but as Erica mentioned, it's a further coordinated process where more of a manual review process takes a few days on average to get a response back. So definitely worth taking a look at Airspace and kind of getting the planning gears moving well before showing up in the field and running into something like that.
Yeah, and Gordon also mentioned in the chat kind of a good differentiation between the two apps. Well, we've showed a few of our platforms actually, but in B4UFLY is more for situational awareness, and when you're ready to apply for a LANC authorization, you'll be directed to Aloft, or you have the option to use any of the other USS service suppliers or UAS service suppliers. And the reason why you don't see those grids on B4UFLY is because you would need to proceed then to our platform or another to actually get that grid information. So you're correct. You'll see it on the Aloft app, but you won't necessarily see those ceiling heights on the B4UFLY. All right. Awesome. Well, a big thanks to Kevin for joining me for today's webinar, for the awesome demo and all the information about checklists and workflows. Really hope that this information was helpful for you personally as a drone operator or for your UAS programs. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to Kevin. He's a wealth of knowledge on all things Aloft and air control. And yeah, we hope to see you on the next webinar, which will be in June. And this episode also will come out as a podcast. So if you haven't subscribed yet to our B4UFLY Check Them Out podcast, check that out anywhere podcasts are tested. Awesome. Thank you. Everyone have a great day.